What's up, Cannabis Cup? How's it going?
Welcome, guys. Can you hear me?
Can you hear him? You have to turn it on. All right. Welcome to a live recording of Free Weed from Danko.
Yay! I appreciate you guys coming out. I'm going to get right to this panel. We're going to do quick introductions and get right to the cultivation stuff. I just want you to know, if you don't know, who we've got up here. Starting here to my right. Did we want to do a little more banter before we introduce?
Was that enough banter? You guys feel satisfied? It's hot outside.
So welcome here. You know, it's pretty amazing what's been going on here for all these years, and we're just really.
This is our fifth time in the area.
But first time north of the Bay, like really coming to NorCal, where you know, where it all began for the U.S. and where all of this is really, you know, generations upon generations of people have been cultivating and being part of this community. So we really appreciate the welcome from you guys, and I guess you got anything to say?
Yeah, thanks for joining us. The panel's going to talk, but after that, if you have questions, we'll do a little Q&A as well, so keep that in mind. But Dan, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, we don't have much time, so I'll do quick introductions. To your right is Mr. Rick Frommer. He was a co-founder of Harborside Health Center, as well as the buyer there for many years, which basically means he's the guy who rejected probably 80 to 90% of the flowers that vendors brought him. And we're going to talk about why he rejected them and what it takes to grow AAA quality Cannabis Cup winning Harborside Health Center top shelf bud. And so welcome, Rick, and tell us what you've been up to, you know, since no longer being the buyer.
Yeah, I work on education programs both for the staff and outreach programs with seniors, and lately I've been working a lot with parents of children, specifically around CBD medications and stuff, which has been really exciting, fulfilling, and also kind of heart-wrenching work too.
Wow, okay. Hey Mike, when you come back, grab a couple waters, please. Thank you. Thank you, Rick. Welcome. To Rick's right is Aaron from DNA Genetics, a multiple Cannabis Cup winner, multiple award winner all over the world. Pretty much every contest they enter, they've placed, won, shown, trifectas, quinellas, whatever it takes, they've done it, and celebrating now a decade plus.
Yes,
decade. Of DNA Genetics. So welcome, Aaron, and let us know if you have a couple words to say about anything new with DNA.
Yeah, we're happy to announce we've formed an alliance. We started making some new substrates and stuff like that. We're introducing cork and taking away perlite out of the soil game. We're doing it all natural, a renewable source, and and then we're expanding into South America, doing in Chile. We're opening up a shop and distribution for South America of multiple seed banks under our wing. Rare Dank is some Cali Connection seeds we're going to be selling. Crockett's line, who's outside right now, some Tangy seeds. I mean, yeah, sky's the limit. It's
awesome.
Big thing.
All right, I'm going to press this one. All right, and to Aaron's right is a longtime High Times contributor, most gardens in High Times ever, greatest gardens of all time, amazing indoor technological stuff, way ahead of its time in the growing part and in the concentrate part, because I recently reread an article from 1999 talking about trichome technologies and how they're developing honey oil and butane extracted stuff. So this is Kay from Trichome Technologies. 30 years of cultivating, and yeah. Tell them a little bit about Trichome and what you're up to right now.
Well, we're a research and development and consulting firm, and we consult for some of the largest gardens, like large-scale indoor production and outdoor production facility at multiple spots in the United States and throughout the world, and as well as terpene isolation and many other components to the MC.
Yeah, you've even developed a new cold trap for Cross International that pulls terpenes out of the process, allowing you to add them back later after they would have been stripped out by the dewaxing.
Correct. Well, might be waxing pumped out by the pump just under vacuum. They're going to evacuate. They're the first things to evaporate before the water, before the ethanol or anything else.
All right, and you know, Kay has seen some of the biggest grow rooms, marijuana grow rooms in the world, and consulted on them and helped them to improve their production. So he can help pretty much anybody on Earth produce more under the same amount of lights and equipment. So we'll talk about that as well. To the right of Kay is an amazing woman, the better half of the man to her right, and it's Ms. Jill, a female American breeder. This is a very rare thing, very rare, award-winning female American breeder. And the plants are females, and you take a certain amount. And Ms. Jill, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing, because you guys do a charity stuff too.
Absolutely, we have a charity garden right now that is currently growing. Last year we took the charity garden, we took half of the meds that were accumulated from that, and we sold those meds and used the money to buy toys and such. And the rest we used the meds and donated to patients. And I have an ongoing charity called Ms. Jill's People Helping People. And you can always donate to through PayPal at donationsforpeople@gmail.com, and it's number 4. And also, right now, I have just created a strain called Brian Berry Cough, and that is in honor of my friend Brian Dingwood, who just recently passed on June 5th of ALS. And also right now, I'd like to let everyone know, as part of my charity, I have a quilt that has been made of 35 different shirts from different people of the industry. It was put together by our daughters, and very nice back stitching, and you can come by our booth and buy a raffle ticket for $5 a piece, and all of the money goes back to charity.
Excellent. And also, if you guys know the Jilly Bean, that's a creation of Ms. Jill. So thank you for that. And TGA Genetics, wouldn't be TGA Genetics without Mr. Sub Cool to Jill's right. So Sub, tell us a little bit about TGA and some of your award-winning strains as well.
You know, we're pretty excited. The Jelly Bean win down in Colorado. That was pretty much a sweep for us, and we were especially proud since we did the winner. That was kind of exciting. TGA Genetics is gone from a seed company to basically an American seed bank. We have 7 American breeders under our banner now. We all breed in the U.S. in the legal medical space. And we're doing some really interesting stuff with CBDs right now, working on 3-to-1s, 2-to-1s. And our Pennywise just recently tested 21% CBD, no CBD. From breeding aspect, that's pretty damn exciting.
Excellent, excellent. And to Mr. Subcool's right is my mentor, my predecessor at High Times as cultivation reporter and editor, and someone who believed in me before I really even believed in myself, Mr. Kyle Cushman. Welcome, Kyle. Tell us a little bit about what you've got going on. You've got your breeding stuff, and you've got some plant food.
Yeah, I'm really busy. Still trying to teach the whole world how to grow cannabis cup quality weed. You know, through KyleCushman.com, free growers forum. Encourage people to participate in that. I even have a free phone app you can download now. Kyle Cushman lets you write into the grow forum. You can get a lot of information. We got a really good online growers community, organic and organic. And then there's Vegan Matrix and Cushman Genetics and Buds and Roses.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we'll get into some grow stuff with you as well. We'll talk about veganics. To Kyle's right, last but certainly not least, a legend in the breeding and growing game for many, many years. Creator of the legendary blueberry strain, and many others, Flow, Old Time Moonshine, and some of my all-time favorites, Mr. DJ Short. All right, we're gonna get right into some grow stuff. Maybe I'll start here with Rick, because we talked about the buyers and what the buyer's looking for, and you know, he's dealing with the end product. So we'll start at the end and ask Rick, what are the visual cues and what are the things that you look for before you, let's say, reject something from a vendor at Harborside?
You know, the answer to this question still is, for a long time, the initial appearance of it, obviously, the amount of trichomes that are present, But as patients in the last few years have gotten increasingly more sophisticated about the inputs that are going in to their cannabis, we're seeing terpene, profile basically becoming more and more important in people's buying decisions as people are having more and more choices amongst, say their OG Kushes or their chems or their things, whereas a few years ago they were just happy to get those strains. Now they're really a lot pickier about the quality that those strains are grown with. So we're really seeing, flush being, always a key thing, but even subtle differences that a year or two ago might not have been as important as the people are getting more and more sophisticated. We're really seeing that become more important.
So burnability is a big thing, and that's due to the way that people are flushing.
Yeah, I mean, High Times has even added burnability as one of the judging categories now, and I think it's a really smart addition to there because you can tell, as any of these growers will tell you, you can tell a lot just by the way a joint burns as to what it was grown in, how well it was flushed, and patients and consumers are just getting increasingly more demanding of the growers, which I think is great. We've seen some really phenomenal cannabis these days.
Excellent. Aaron is busy rolling a joint. Oh, he's done. Aaron, let's go back to the seed, the popping of the seeds, and what do you recommend? People are paying up to some, a couple $100 in some cases for a 10-pack of seeds. They really want every one of them to pop. And what is your tried and true method for popping seeds? Germination.
I'm a firm believer in letting the seeds soak let them soak in the shot glass until they crack, and then I place them in the paper towel method. And just be careful that you don't let them sit in the soaking paper towels. Let them just be damp, so the root has somewhere to grow. And then from there, let them get about 1 inch long, and then plant them in whatever medium you desire to use. That's been my tried and true method since I started growing.
Excellent. Kate, we talked a little bit about some of these larger grow room applications, and you had mentioned to me something really interesting, that sometimes when people are drying a lot of cannabis in one room, it can actually have an effect on the cannabis that's growing in a nearby room. Can you explain a little bit about that? Am I getting that properly?
Well, there's a little truth to that. There's two different issues here. You get people with large-scale production facilities, 100,000 square feet, and to have that many vegetative plants, that many clones on hand, on stock, on hand at all times is a difficult thing. So they end up trying to have one room like that come down at the same time is almost impossible. So you got to stagger it. You end up with one room full, another room empty, and then you rotate them. But what happens if you have a closed loop system? Most people just think that you can just control the humidity, control the temperature in a closed loop system with no fresh oxygen source. You end up with high humidity, high temperature, and you end up with mildew situations. But more importantly, what you're referring to is something called ethylene. And what happens is that the crop that's in the ripening stage ends up prematurely ripening the stuff that's farther behind it. So literally you'll have stuff that ripens itself 2 to 4 weeks early, and even more so ripens the next following crop 2 to 4 weeks even earlier than that.
And what's the way to avoid that? Just drying them in a completely different location?
Well, no, that's for the cultivation aspect of it. I'm just saying that you must have a fresh air source. You must have fresh oxygen in this thing. You just can't have a sealed box with high CO2, a humidifier and a dehumidifier, and an air circulation system going on.
They want you to speak up.
Better? Yeah.
Yeah.
Better.
All right.
So yeah, you can't work with a sealed system. You're going to have a fresh air source. You're going to have oxygen induced into that environment at some time. Now, the other thing you were referencing was a drying and curing room. In a drying and curing room, you get some people that just don't understand how to deal with and process a large amount of material like that. So they'll send a crew in, they'll harvest one day, they'll hang it up upside down or whatever they're going to do, and then the next day they do the same thing, and they keep this. They think it's a repetitious cycle. You can't have stuff that was picked 7 days ago in the same room as something that was picked today. It's gonna absorb moisture. You're gonna lock in chlorophylls and everything else. And I walked into huge rooms like half this size, and the second I opened the door, it smelled like ammonia, which is degradation. And so, I mean, the product will never taste right, never smell right, never be quality. And even then, in that closed loop environment, you didn't produce a high amount of essential oils as well. So you've got very precious little of them. So to put them into an environment like that and make them all taste and smell the same is what's going on in a lot of these large-scale facilities, because the people have never, ever processed that much at one time.
All right. Ms. Joe, you guys have recently moved and started doing some outdoor stuff, and I know you're involved with that. What have you learned from doing the outdoor that's different from what you were doing indoors before?
Well, normally indoors we would top much sooner. We've learned that we need to let them grow larger before we top. We need to top more often. You don't want to let your plants get too high, because once flowering starts, the stretch starts, they will get massive and you will not be able to see the top of your buds. They will be so large, they will get root rot and you will not be able to see it. You want to keep your plants cropped down small enough so you have control of them and you can see what's going on with them, and you have smaller buds versus the large buds.
And you guys are in full sun, so how much water does that take when you have plants, huge plants in full sun?
We have some 150 gallon and we also have some 200 gallon pots, and I would say I water them for, I would say it was about 25 minutes last night. It took me to water them at full speed, so until I could see them seep out, and that would last for about 48 hours.
Wow. And it's still June, so...
It's still June and they have not grown full root bases yet.
Wow, interesting. Tell me, you've got amazing strains, and everyone's smoked them, but what do people need to do when they buy a pack of TGA seeds if they want to grow something that's a Cannabis Cup quality winning strain?
Great question, Danny. I'm a big proponent of selection. We call it either mapping a strain or a pheno hunt, and basically, you grow a 10-pack of seeds. Roll them all out. About day 45, I'm able to tell the males from the females, get rid of the males and keep the females. Mark them all. Jilly is more practical. She uses A, B, C, and 1, 2, 3. I like to use silly names like Scooby and stuff like that.
Closer.
Sorry, Scooby and stuff like that. But the point is, you keep a female plant and you also keep a copy of the plant in clone stage. And then you grow the plant out to the end and you let it cure for 6 weeks in a jar. And you test it, and testing it's, we all like to test it, it's pretty simple, but don't miss any of those steps, because we've screwed up before. We've tested it early, and we're like, hey, we like number 4, but then after it sits in a jar for 6 weeks, we're like, hey, oh shit, we should have kept number 1. I mean, I know everybody's been in that boat, so we really, to us, a pack of seeds is like a pack of Cracker Jacks, and while it's really nice to be able to go into a dispensary and buy a clone for $8, I mean, who did that selection? I want to do my selection because she likes blue cheese and I don't. So if she selected a clone of Jelly Bean for me, it might not be the one that I like. So.
And I would like to say it's kind of like a banana. You have a green banana, it's really sour tasting, it's hard to eat. And the longer it sits and ripens, the more that everything breaks down, oxidizes, it turns into a soft fruit. It changes, it has more sugars. Same thing with the buds. You want to let it ripen and you want to keep it in the jar and make sure you burp the jar, of course, but you want to keep it and let it cure before you smoke it and test it.
And then the last thing I want to say is one time I made the mistake of doing exactly what I just told you, and then we grew the clones again, and they got better. It's almost like we budded them maybe a little too early, maybe they weren't completely mature, maybe the strain hasn't completely matured. Maybe I'm just high, but the second run, it was just really so much better. So when you're doing a pheno hunt or mapping a strain, don't be in such a hurry to pick that winning pheno. And I love to say this, Danny, all these keepers that people have, Genius, Princess 75, and the Cherry AK, they're just fucking cuts that somebody grew out and found that good cut and then passed it out to people. So that's it.
So within every seed pack, there's the potential for something unique and new, a new phenotype, and you can keep that as a mother plant and grow it over and over in a room by using cloning techniques.
Yeah, there's a clone going around California right now called Time Rec 2. It's because it was number 2. It's actually sold in dispensaries. This Subcool's Time Rec number 2 clone. I just gave it to some dude, and it's now company. So it's just crazy.
Kyle, tell us a little bit about what veganic growing is and why you think that's the way people should go.
Well, I use this analogy. It's kind of like Thanksgiving dinner and sushi dinner are both really good for you. They're both nutritious, really yummy dinners. But after you have Thanksgiving dinner, you end up sitting on the couch and your body's got to make all these digestive enzymes, and the plant just has to work a little bit harder. You need other factors to come into play, like decomposition. And with veganic nutrition, the nutrition is already nearly completely bioavailable. So everything we put in, the plants can immediately use. And so everything we put in gets used, and then there's no residue left over afterwards. So that's what gives the finished product its undeniably cleaner and smoother taste. It's a cleaner, lighter diet. More easily assimilated by the plants, more easily metabolized.
Excellent. And do you still have to flush if you're using veganic nutrients?
You always want to flush your plants.
And what is that? What's that process about?
What I recommend people do is, the nice thing about vegan matrix and veganic cultivation, I find the plants stay green all the way to the end until you cut the food out. There's no necrotic, there's no lockout, no lockup. And so 3 weeks out from harvest, I recommend cutting down to half strength of all nutritive products. And then 2 weeks out from harvest, it's just enzymatic tea and honey or sugar. And then 1 week of just straight water.
And so when you say honey or sugar, you're diluting that, right?
Right, exactly. You're using a carbohydrate product, a complex carbohydrate product, anything from sucanat to molasses to Humboldt honey to some thick stuff. Yeah, we use Hybrix molasses at the moment. We change it up every now and then, but and that's pretty much our method.
All right, excellent. DJ, I guess I'm going to give you the opportunity to discuss whatever it is you'd like to talk about with regards to cannabis and selection and whatever, because I don't really... you have free reign. Unless you really need a question.
The DJ Short Show.
All right, anarchy. Let's go. Well, usually at this stage of the game, we talk about the 11-13 life cycle, so I can go ahead and jump into that.
Let's see how I was. I'll prep it by saying that most of the literature and majority of the grow books and the advice that you're going to get will tell you that you veg at 18 or 20 or 22 hours of light per day, and you flower at 12 hours on, 12 hours off. And DJ has an alternate theory to that, and he's going to explain why maybe you want to think differently.
Sure, and that's basically in your bud cycle, 11 hours on, 13 hours off. It's the same flower cycle as the tropics. This came to me from old timers in the mid 80s who figured out make your night a little bit longer. One thing that I've been able to, the value I see in that is the phenotypic expressions I see on 11-13 I don't see on a 12-12. So your plants will react differently. And what we're talking about there is genotype and phenotype. Genotype is the genetic makeup. Phenotype is the expression the plant shows you according to the environmental triggers that it has. A real quick example on that is cold weather purpling. It has to have that in the genotype for it to express itself, but it also needs that environmental trigger of a colder temperature. We also found that it's really not a set cold temperature, but difference between day and night temperature. So for those of you who are running with purple strains that you want more color in, let your day temp go up a little bit and bring your night temp down a little bit in your last week there, and you can really bring on those colors. But the 11-13, hear me now, thank me later.
There was one other thing.
That is really some really useful information. Absolutely.
You're saving an hour of electricity every day too.
But let me say that you are going. It is possible that you may sacrifice yield, but you're going to increase quality dramatically. May sacrifice yield.
What about yield? Actually, no. It's supposed to, theoretically, it's supposed to increase yield. Plants take in nutrient during the day. A plant's main source of food is light, not nitrogen. Those are all like supplements to help it metabolize that chlorophyll from the light. Just brain fart. Where was I at?
About that, I said lower.
Oh, right. And they put fiber on during the night cycle. So theoretically, the stretch you see at night. So they're putting that on at night. So yeah, it can definitely.
That's actually why I don't recommend a 24-hour light veg.
Except to rejuvenate a plant, tough clones, maybe for 72 hours, and that's it.
You also had an interesting theory about the last 2 or 3 days of flowering, all darkness?
Yeah, 3 days of darkness. I'm actually getting a whole bunch of different tips from people these days, one of which was 24-hour darkness right at the beginning of the bud cycle. And now, of course, it's been kind of a rote for a few years now. 3 days of darkness before harvest, or just 1 day of darkness. While the plant is still alive, it's producing resins, and light breaks down the cannabinoids and the terpenes. So by eliminating the light, and the plant is still making these oils and terpenes, you're increasing that.
Kyle has a question?
No, I actually wanted to pick Kenny's brain a little bit.
Okay.
I wanted you to talk to us a little bit about, I tuned in, unfortunately, a little bit at the end. We were having a little private discussion, I think. But I want to make sure that you share some more information on, you said that at some time or another, a garden has to get fresh oxygen, okay? And I just want you to elaborate on that, because I want you to talk about the detriment of having a sealed environment, as I know that a lot of people have been taught to grow under sealed environments.
I mean, a lot of people think that a plant just needs CO2. It breathes in CO2 and expels oxygen. That's not really, it is true in some sense, but if you were to take that same plant, put it in a plastic bag and only pump in CO2, that plant would die. It needs oxygen to metabolize the food and process the water, and water is part of H2O, or oxygen is part of H2O. So it bonds with the nutrients, and that's what gives you inoculant pressure and makes that plant grow. So without oxygen present in that environment at all times, you just stifled development, stifled everything you're trying to do.
Okay, so in a practical example, in a non-commercial, but let's say relatively large-sized grow, let's call it a small warehouse. How do you recommend, and how and when do you recommend supplementing oxygen?
It doesn't matter how big or small the garden is, it still needs oxygen, so you're going to have to supplement from somewhere, whether it's opening the door, closing the door every day, or working in the environment, or whatever have you.
So what would the timing be? Because work that in for me in the use of carbon dioxide supplementation.
Well, it's a parts per million. You're going to have 20% constant. At least as much as you have outside.
Oxygen.
Oxygen. The same oxygen content you have outside, you're going to want inside. If you walk inside and you kind of like a pit in your stomach and bangs and you get cold, clammy, sweaty, and things, you have to ask yourself, is there enough oxygen in that room?
So I get it. So you want you don't want a solely CO2 enriched room. You want an oxygen plus CO2 enriched room. There you go. That's what we need.
All right, I have a question for Sub, actually. We talked a lot about, in the past, about cation, is it cation ratio? Or cation ratio, the exchange of light for sugar.
Oh, okay. The Krebs cycle.
Krebs cycle, right, that's
the Krebs cycle.
Right. Can you expand a little bit on that and just how that photosynthetic process is?
Yeah, I mean, basically what happens is, and the way I interpret it is that the plant absorbs the nutritions and the sugars and everything and stores them up in the families. And the families are also solar panels, in my opinion. But the food is stored up in them. And a lot of growers, especially hydroponic growers, will grow plants green all the way to the end. We just don't do that. almost all of our cannabis that you see in dispensaries that is produced by me and Ms. Jill is purple. And the reason is because toward the end, we let the plant actually fade out. And cannabis, by nature, is actually purple. It's covered up by the chlorophyll of the green. What Danny's talking about is at the very end of the cycle, the plant starts eating itself. It starts sucking the sugars out of the fan leaves, and you see the fan leaves turn yellow and falling off. Well, farmers have known for thousands of years that you can actually stimulate this, like he was talking about with humble honey and sugars and stuff like that. But really what's important is to know that we believe that a plant that looks like it's been driven down the road in the desert for 2 weeks, when it's finished, tastes better than one that's still green and the leaves are all still turgid and everything. You know? Yeah, you want the plant to look like it finished. And if you're I don't want to say pro grower, I'm not trying to sound egotistical, but if you grow 7 crops a year indoors for the last 4 decades, you can literally look at a plant, and know that it's done. You know, we don't write dates on calendars anymore because I actually think it screws with my, I don't want to know. I want to have to use my brain. Look at the plant and say, okay, the trichomes are amber to where I like them. Everybody likes them different. Some people like more. I like about a 30% Pepsi because I smoke hash and I like light-colored hash, so I don't like dark hash. So. But basically, a lot of people don't understand this. It's in Clark's Botany in the final chapter. It's the chapter most people don't read, and I think everybody should read it because it does talk about this process.
Excellent. Aaron, I know we're making it sound really complicated to grow pot. I want to bring it down and make it a little more simple. So just explain how someone can grow a couple of plants in a closet for themselves pretty easily without spending a lot of money. I mean, most of the money is going to go into the grow light, and what should they do in order to have a great crop? Even just keeping it real simple.
Air movement. Bring in fresh air and exhaust in the warm air that's created by the light that you have in your closet. And
so air movement is super important.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's a closet. It's going to be almost a sealed environment. You have to have some kind of air flow in and air flow out. Humidity also will be a factor, because light and watering and dark cycles create humidity, and you could mold out your whole room. And just good genetics also help. Nothing too. If you're in a closet, you don't want to grow anything crazy sativa because it's your closet and you don't have ample headroom to grow some of these varieties, or you have to flower them right from clone to get them at a certain size. I think it's really about the airflow, especially in the closet.
Okay. Joe?
I would like to add, if you're a renter, you wouldn't want to make a lot of marks in your closet. You would pull up your carpet in the corner, make an exhaust right there in the corner, make an intake above. You can cover that with a nice exhaust fan when you leave, so maybe nobody will even notice it. That would be what I would have to say for that part.
And that's a stealthy way not to have to run tubes in and out of your closet space.
It's a big deal in California. If you go on Craigslist and try to find an apartment, it says no 215 on 99% of the ads. I have 5 friends right now that can't afford to own a home. I mean, it's hard to buy a home here. It took us 20 years. And, the renters, basically, the landlords are saying no 215, so you definitely have to be able to set up a stealth grow to where not only you're not destroying the property, but they also don't know. And I will want to tell you guys about a product. I don't even know the name of the product. They make fans now that are acoustically wrapped, and you can sit them in your lap, turn them wide open, you can't hear them. So if you're in a close neighborhood, where your neighbor's 4 foot across, that's something to look into. So new technology is also something that's really to take care of.
And on that note, you could also tap in your exhaust fan right to your bathroom exhaust as well. Mm-hmm. And maybe think about using LEDs or fluorescents. Keep them low like that. Keep the heat down, and as well you can get the plants closer to them.
Now, Ms. Jill, is there a unique perspective that you have to the cannabis plant, being a female and a breeder of the plant? And is there anything that you think the ladies have on the guys?
Well, of course. Of course. They speak to us, we speak to them. It's a girl thing. Well, I can't tell you.
I'd like to actually answer that question. So Jilly has the uncanny ability to walk in the grow room that I spend a lot of time in, walk over to plants and go, yeah, that's the keeper. And then 50 days later, after I work my ass off, and we get to the end of it, guess one's the one that's like 90% of the time the one that I end up keeping. The one that she pointed to while I was asleep. So I don't know how she does it.
I would actually choose the one that we call Space Queen now. Space Queen number 2, yeah. Space Jill, I'm not sure what name we use now. Space Bomb.
Nice, cool. Kay, you see some of the largest grow rooms right now, and you're seeing the changes that are happening. Rooms are getting bigger and bigger. I recently did a story called The Indoor Acre, 44,000 square foot indoor grow facility in Denver, 800 lights, all in one, well, no, separated into different spaces, but huge. And you see those routinely. What do you see as the future of cannabis production in the face of, you know, the end of prohibition?
Prohibition? It's going to be mindful of the cost of production. So, what really, is the cheapest? The sun is the cheapest. So it's going to go into large scale greenhouses. I mean, because that's got the lowest cost of production. But you still have to heat, you still have to cool and control the environment in that greenhouse.
And it's tough, right?
And it's very tough, and it's still very expensive. I mean, if you're in Denver and it's minus 17 out, you're going to be spending some big money to heat that thing.
Right.
Hopefully less money than you make, than you end up with profit. So,
right.
In that vein, the same thing as if you're in Arizona and you've got 115 degrees, So, I believe in the future that you're going to get the lighting companies like, Westinghouse, Sylvania, and Philips, and all those are going to compete for our dollar. Right now, they sell these lights, but they don't acknowledge our industry at all. In the future, they're going to end up, competing for our dollar. They're going to make more efficient, better lights. So those are going to have a lower cost of production, less heat associated with, and I feel the industry will end up going back indoors because it's cheaper to heat and cheaper to cool.
So you think it'll go from greenhouses back to indoors eventually?
Someday, once we have proper technology, people are catering to our environment,
And when you're talking about the greenhouses, you're talking about a greenhouse with supplemental lighting for times when you don't have sunshine, and light deprivation capabilities for times when there's too much sunshine.
Absolutely. So you can get multiple crops per year, control the height of some strains that want to go too tall, and gives you a complete control of the outside environment.
Now, if someone has to buy one grow light and they're growing at home for themselves, what would you recommend? Not necessarily the brand, but the type of light.
I mean, right now I just don't see that inductions are there yet. LEDs aren't there yet. Yes, they produce a little bit less heat. They're not producing a full spectrum. They're not giving you a full finished product the way they should.
So HID, high intensity discharge light.
Unfortunately, still at HID.
And which of that? There's metal halide and there's high pressure sodium. Do you find a big difference?
Depending on the stage of growth, you're going to utilize more a predominance of one or another, but I prefer to use a 60-40 mix. I like a 60% metal halide or sodium halide and a 40% a 60% sodium halide, 40% metal halide. I like a lot of blue spectrum and stuff that encourages resin development and stuff like that.
All right. So
how do you feel about the plasma lighting?
I just don't feel it's there yet. I think it's a very, very expensive option, and if that bulb goes out, try to get one real fast. And all the pieces, parts, but it does have merit. And let's see if they can drop the price and make it competitive. And that's the beautiful thing is in prohibition. I mean, these people are going to have to prove their results. I mean, they say they got a better light. Show me you got a better light. And their competitor's immediately going to want to compete with that, so they're going to make a better light.
all right.
Have you noticed one of the we've been working with Gavita since we've been in Amsterdam for a long time. We've got to test multiple versions of all their lightings. We felt that plasma lights, instead of using metal halide, you can use plasma lights as that supplemental lighting. It also, plants really thrive. It's a great spectrum of light. And the new Gavita double-ended bulbs, I think they're the Gavita Pros. I I can honestly say, like, I've seen people that normally crop, let's just say 1 pound per light, double their harvest. So now they're getting 2 pounds of light just with Gavita Bros. And there's also the Papillon lighting, which is almost the same thing as the Gavita. It's just a different company.
That's Philips, right?
Philips. Well, Gavita is the ballast. Philips are the bulbs. And Philips is another Dutch company, and they make lights for growers, for farmers. I mean, the facilities they have in Holland are some of the state-of-the-art facilities that they use Gavitas in, and they're having amazing results using these lights. Gavitas, like, they work with farmers for flowers.
Actually, I have two things I want to say. I have a heating and air background, and I'm called on more and more today to run loads for concrete slabs that have chill water lines or either hot water lines in them. And I ran a load calculation for a guy 2 days ago. He needs a 60-ton chiller for his greenhouse. He grows 65,000 pounds of marijuana in Colorado. TGA, all TGA. It's called Maggie's Farm. I can't even imagine what 65,000 pounds of marijuana. And then he tells me, and we run out every year. We're trying to get bigger every year. So I just wanted to bring that part up. The other thing I wanted to talk about that I was really, everybody here on this table has been growing a long time, but I was blown away to know, and I want all you guys to know this because I thought I knew a lot about it. Your reflectors, you ever think about it, you take your glass out and you clean it, but you don't clean reflectors. And that's why Gavita figured out to do that replaceable reflector, because even if I go in and clean my reflectors, I'm scuffing them up. And we have some friends at a local Monster Gardens. They do all kind of testing. And so they actually set all these hoods up with all these instruments, the power meters and everything. And no kidding, you turn a hood on and run it for a month, and you lose 15% of your light because the damn reflectors got dust on it. I never even knew that. So it's literally steep. Yeah, and with the glass too, I've always cleaned the glass. But who would have thought, A, that you need to clean the reflector, and B, if you clean it enough, you've ruined the reflection of it. So Gavitas, I don't know how much Gavita's insert cost, but it's $15 or something like that. And they fit in the beam. And what we're going to see, I believe, is I've designed a lot of grow rooms in my life, and they're all based on 8 to 9 foot ceilings. And now you're going to see 10 to 12 foot ceilings because these new high intensity. I wanted to share this with everyone at the table though. I was at this same shop the other day, and they're using LED for a completely different reason. They have a LED that uses white, red, and blue. They have full adjustment on every spectrum. They're actually able to change the taste, the flavor of cannabis by either giving it more white, more red, more blue. They don't even have a science yet for it, but it's just supplementing with UVA, UVB. We've all played with this through the years. But these guys are actually able to say, hey, we take this strain and we go with more red, it's spicy. We take this strain and go with more white, it's fruitier. We take this strain and go with more blue. So the advances coming in the LED, I think you're going to see in supplementation, not in actual trying to produce with the stuff.
Right.
So just want to pass that on.
Excellent. Kyle, take us through the drying and curing process and explain a little bit about the difference between drying and curing and why curing is so important.
Mostly for full enjoyment of the product, curing is really important. And drying is really important because you can't cure properly until you dry properly. There's a lot of different ways to do this. It's going to depend a lot on the quantity of cannabis that we're talking about, and the amount of workload that you have to squeeze into, and how many hands you have to help. So at Buds and Roses, we do it really an old school method, and we chop the plants down whole when they're done. Maybe about 10 days before harvest, we've already de-leafed it. All the sugar leaves, all the water leaves are all gone, and basically any leaf with a stem sticking out is gone, allowing about 10 to 14 days for the light to penetrate fully into the plant to help try to mature some of the lower buds. And then we chop the plant down in the morning before the growing cycle gets heated for the day, and chop the plants down whole, string them up on lines, and keep them in a temperature and humidity controlled environment in the dark. We're also experimenting with, I don't know if you could say experimenting, we're just trying some of our grows, leaving them in the dark for several days ahead of time. And I generally tend to think that it leads to a tastier flower at the end. So let them stay in the dark for 3 days at the end. Once you think they're done, and you've already checked the trichomes, let them go 3 days, 72 hours in the dark, and then harvest them, hang them up whole, and this gives you a little bit more of a slower, a more even dry, rather than chopping the flowers or the buds off of the stems and laying them out on screens where you'd have to turn them or rotate them. It's going to be a little different everywhere. Just let it dry the way it naturally does. And 5 days, 7 days later, the buds are pretty much dry on the outside, and that's a good time to buck them down, as I like to say. It's what I call removing the flowers from the stems. We buck them down into bins, and that's leaving enough moisture in the flowers so that they can now be processed, because they're going to be handled, and they're going to be out in the light, and this could take half a day or whatnot. So you don't want it to be too dry by the time you get to that process. And then from there, depending on how dry or not they are, they either go into glass jars for curing, or maybe into some Rubbermaid bins for a little bit of burping for a day or two, or just a little bit more pre-curing, let's call it. And then it's into glass jars for 2 weeks with really without any checks. And then if we've done our job right, when we check it after a couple of weeks, we should pop it open. There should be gases in there, but it should smell really sweet and no hint of ammonia. And that means we did our job right, and then we can close them up and cure them up for another month or two.
All right, Rick, you wanted to say something about curing?
Yeah, I can't overemphasize what Kyle was saying. Like probably 90+% of all the cannabis that we see at Harborside and that I see in general in California or anywhere in the country has not been cured. It's been dried. It's gone through that 10-day, 2-week process that Kyle's talking about to get it dried, but it hasn't actually been cured. And because we have the ability to test cannabis right on site now with Stipo's Quantican device, we do a lot of testing for growers to kind of figure out what an optimal time to cure is. And we see increases in THC potency as much as like 4% during that curing process. So not only are you getting rid of converting chlorophylls to sugars and providing something that just tastes a lot better to smoke, you're actually significantly increasing the potency of the final flower by going through that 6-week, 8-week, or even longer cure sometimes.
And Rick, on that same note, when you see it test really high for CBG, you know it's supposed to go early, correct?
The Quantican, unfortunately, only does THC and CBD, but if we ran a full spec from the lab, you would definitely see that stuff for sure.
Yeah.
I want to ask DJ to take us through a breeding process just quickly. I know a lot of people want to create their own strains. It's a difficult thing to do, and there's a lot of things you need to understand before you just take male pollen and add it to a female flower. So explain to people a little bit about that process, the selection process, and what an F1 and all of that sort of thing is.
Sure. I started with landrace P1s that were Highland Thai, Highland Oaxacan, Chocolate Thai, and Afghan. Now, 3 of those are sativa, one's extremely indica. The parent stock were very different. I used the pollen from the indica to the sativa. I went both ways and tried them. I just preferred taking the pollen from the indica to the sativa. Most of my contemporaries in the day, all of my contemporaries went the other way. You got to understand, when the indica plant showed up, it was very novel compared to the sativa we were growing, and it was at the same time that HID lighting came. So I always like to point out to people that prior to this, it was, picture an 18-week sativa under fluorescence.
Oh my God.
yeah, well, we did it. Anyhow, here's this indica plant, oh boy, but it was, skunky, green, and just really knocked you down. It was the couch lock thing. Easy to manicure, short flowering time, right? I mean, 8 weeks, whoa, she's done. But for me, I mean, it lasted less than a year before I was like, oh, been there, done that. I'm tired of that. 1983, Robert Clark, I believe, under the name of R in High Times, did on the cover of High Times was a black cover with an indica bud and a red slash symbol saying "Ban the Bud." And we got tired of it. You know, we wanted those tropical sativa back. He was concerned about these hybrid genetics getting back to the tropics and polluting the gene pool. All right, anyhow, you have these very different P1s. When you cross those, you then have your F1 generation, which is the first filial generation. And if you're following this course that I'm talking about, where you have two extremely dissimilar parents, you will see what is referred to in biology as transgressive segregation. So the F1s are all uniform, the F2s are where the diversity begins. Just so you can wrap your head around it, I use dog breeding. And let's just imagine for P1s we have a Great Dane and a Chihuahua, all right? Let's hope the Great Dane is the mother. And we cross those, and our F1s are going to be something in between, but very uniform, something the size of a pit bull or a boxer. You take any two of those F1s and cross them, and you end up in your F2 generation, where according to transgressive segregation, you will see examples larger than the Great Dane and smaller than the Chihuahua. They go beyond the parameters of the parent stock. So that's what I was seeing in the F2s. And then in the F2s, I would say for blueberry, it was a blueberry mother, a blueberry father. Bring those together to make the F2 seeds. And I should see more uniformity in that F3. For example, in the F2, maybe 20% of those were berry, and out of that 20%, I pick a berry mother and a berry father. Well, by the F3, I should be seeing 50% if I did it right. By the F4, 75%, and so on. And it's just really doing that selection work to pick what you want. I mean, I could have gone any route. I could have gone orange, pine, cedar, as far as flavors, different structures, so on and so forth. But it's that selection process on and through that makes that happen. And looking for that transgressive segregation, two very dissimilar parents. Yes, you cross the F1s with themselves, and any two of the F1s, you don't have to do any selection process in there. The numbers, you hear about numbers. Numbers are important in the P1 and in the F2 generation. That's primarily in the P1. I had between 2,000 and 3,000 pass through my hands for the three that I selected.
Excellent. All right, well, we've run out of time. I'm sorry we're not going to be able to do questions on the show live, but we're going to go to the back, just to the outside. Whoever wants to join us, we're going to go head back there, and you can ask some questions on a personal level with some of these guys if you have some questions. Thank you very much for coming by. Thanks to this panel. Check out their websites, check out all their information, follow them on social media. Tell them free weed sent you. I got some stickers for you guys. They got some stickers and stuff.